Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of the Tatum York podcast, where we talk about a wide range of topics from politics to culture and art, all of that fun stuff. This week I had the pleasure to sit down and talk with Uytae Lee, the personality behind the Vancouver-based YouTube channel About Here, and he also recently started a new series on CBC Gem called Stories About Here, so if any of that interests you, feel free to go check them out maybe before you watch this podcast. In this week's episode, we discuss one of Vancouver's more pressing issues, the housing affordability crisis. And I mean, really this issue affects pretty much everyone around the world right now to some degree or another. It's something that all of us can relate to, and that has made life maybe a little more difficult in recent years. We talk about some of the reasons of why housing has gotten, to the point it has. We also try to address maybe some of the potential solutions or some of the things that we can do to try to bring ourselves out of this affordability crisis. And if you're only here to watch the video for Uytae, I mean, still stick around. We do get to talk about a little bit of what his career is, what he does, and it's just honestly great stuff. So if any of that interests you, feel free to stick around. And without further ado, let's dive into the very first episode of the Tatum York podcast with Vancouver-based content creator Uytae Lee. Hey, my dad actually worked on your mom's apartment. He actually met you, right,
what?
Reynolds? Maybe I'll ask my dad.
Yo!
Because my dad's into painting and drywalling. And he worked. But then what's funny is my dad, he came in, and my dad blanked out, didn't know his name. He called him like Brian or something. He's like, "Oh, are you Brian?" He's like, "No, my name's Ryan."
Yeah. That's a hilarious story.
But apparently he was really nice. So
so the stories are true.
Yes,
he is as he seemed.
If you want to introduce yourself briefly, nothing too.
Oh my gosh, what do I say? I'm Uytae. Oh, that's redundant. I'm Uytae, as Tatum already mentioned. I am, I guess, like a videographer / YouTuber. Still kind of feels funny saying that, but my sort of core area of study, let's say, is on urban planning issues, city policy, public transit, housing. My kind of tagline is like all the issues you kind of find in your backyard, right? Like if you just step outside of your door, from the sidewalks to the trees on those sidewalks to the road, like there's a lot of kind of weird, sometimes, definitely interesting, sometimes messed up policies that sort of design or kind of manifest in what is happening in your neighborhood. And I've always been just like a real nerd about that kind of stuff. So make videos about that. I don't know if that's like a great pitch. Be like, hey, you want to watch a video about sidewalks? Check me out.
If you do want to watch sidewalks, he does have a video about sidewalks. So
probably do, yeah. Anyways, how's that for an intro?
Oh, it's perfect. I'm not as knowledgeable about urban planning, which is why you're here.
I'll do my best to fill in.
So in your education, you have a bachelor degree in urban planning, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
in urban planning. The degree is specifically called community design. I don't know if anyone cares, but it's essentially an urban planning degree.
Okay. Because I wasn't sure, because I was briefly looking in, because you have to look into your guests to see what you're educated.
Oh my gosh, what sort of dirt have you dug up on me, Tatum?
Actually, not much. I found was the UBC. Your UBC profile.
Oh, okay, yep. I've got a side gig. I teach journalism at UBC.
I was looking at your education because I want to know who I'm dealing with here.
Okay.
To make sure,
what are my credentials?
Well, like not in that sense, but just so I can properly introduce the person. I don't want to ask you like questions that are like below your level, or way above your level. I
would worry about way above my level more than below, because I mean, this has been a bit more of an insecurity of mine. I've just got an undergrad degree, so I went into YouTube, basically right out of undergrad, and kind of right out of the gate, I was making kind of these like commentary videos on like work that if I was just working as an urban planner would have been like my senior kind of managers, right? Like projects that I'm like, I think this could be better, but like the people doing that work are like, they've got masters, they've got PhDs, they've been working for 10 plus years in the field. So there is definitely a part of me that's like, who am I really to like kind of criticize like that? But you do what you gotta do.
You telling me? You have an undergrad. I don't even have a degree yet.
Not yet, but soon.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have my associate's degree in hopefully half a year.
Okay. Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah, no, okay. So straight out of your bachelor degree, you went into YouTube, or just
ish.
content?
I mean, I can kind of like break down the story if anyone cares. So I would say like I started making YouTube videos, maybe like in my second and a half / third year of university.
Okay.
And it started off really making videos for school assignments. I don't know about like your education, but at my program, a couple of the teachers, they always had like an option to like, you know, instead of writing the essay or writing the report, just make a video, you know, have some sort of fun twist on this sort of assignment. And I was the guy that was like, I want to choose the video every time because I thought, I don't know, it'd be fun or maybe easier. Turns out it's definitely not easier.
Yeah.
Making a video is not easier than writing an essay. It's just writing an essay with extra steps. But you know, that's kind of where I started. And then I guess like kind of down the line, me and a really good friend of mine that we sort of worked on these videos together, we decided to start this YouTube channel called Planifax. For context, we were going to school in Halifax, so that's where that name comes from.
Sense. Okay.
Yeah, thought it was real clever.
That's awesome.
Planning,
yeah.
Halifax, Planifax. And so we did that basically kind of like, you know, after school, right? Like balanced it with school for the first couple years. And then out of that, you know, kind of a similar deal. We were always like doing it as a side sort of interest hobby. I would say that because it definitely did not make money for a very, very long time. Yeah, gosh, for like several years. And then, you know, it's, I think like just insert many, many, many steps. And now, you know, I have a career in it somehow.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, that's, I feel like it just happens. Like oftentimes you don't really...
No, it definitely doesn't just happen. I mean, you do hear about those stories of people who like just right out of the gate, it's like lightning in a bottle. They've got the charisma, they've got everything, you know, to just be a viral sensation or whatever. That has not been my experience. I've been, you know, videos for like 7-8 years at this point, and it's been just a very gradual, you know, but in many ways like a healthy growth. Kind of feel lucky in that like it's definitely something that I've had to work for, and I've you know, just really balanced with other sorts of jobs and like gigs for a very, very long time, but in a sense like that's helped me just kind of be able to figure out the biz and be smart about how I grow as I grow. So I think there's like I mean, to that point, like I think, you know, that sort of kind of quote unquote making it on YouTube or making videos can happen for some people like very suddenly, and it's quite, you know, jarring, I must imagine. But then, you know, someone like myself, others, it is just like, you know, it starts off as a hobby, then you start, you know, kind of becomes a side hustle, and then it just, you know, becomes more of your full-time job, which is like, I feel very grateful for that.
Yeah, no, that's...
Also, I'm touching your mic, so your viewers / listeners will hate that.
But yeah, no, there's definitely like, from what I've learned of talking to other creators, there's definitely like a range of tons of different scenarios I've heard of people grow. Like some people, it ends up just being their full-time right away, but other people, they have to work like 7-8 years, you said?
Yeah.
That's like...
I'm very old.
No, but that's like the amount of work you put into it. I'm sure it's probably really satisfying to see.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, satisfaction is one of those things, and kind of like to what I was saying earlier. Upon reflection, I am grateful that it happened that way, at least for me, because I know if a lot of growth and success had happened very early on in the career, I would have been very overwhelmed trying to adapt and kind of understand it and grapple with it all.
Yeah,
I feel very fortunate in that, like, because it's been quite gradual, it's like just every year I have like a little extra growth, a little extra, you know, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out what like E&O insurance is for anybody that wants to do like licensed broadcast television, you know, like, or hire a lawyer for a certain film, like, right. It's like every year comes with a bit of growth, but it's not like I had to do it all in one year. So, or to that extent, I'm quite happy with how it worked out, at least on my end. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I've noticed, like looking at all of your content, is you obviously like you grow and you change, but you've really stuck to your passion of like urban planning, and you can see that through where a lot of content creators will experiment and they'll go to where the views come, or they'll change the content constantly, but like throughout you've stuck with the passion. And
I appreciate you saying
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
actually, when I do think about it, for me, what drove the raison d'etre behind the channel always was the subject matter, urban planning, and kind of maybe I had three reasons behind it. Like I quickly realized right out of school that I love talking about urban planning, but I kind of don't like working in it. If you're familiar at all with the work of urban planners, typically you're working within a bureaucracy, city government, even within a consulting firm. The pace is still feels slow for someone like myself, and there's very little sort of satisfaction with your work. I don't want to go down a path of shitting on the profession of urban planners, because it's very important that good, smart people are in those jobs. But for me, I knew quite early on that I didn't feel quite cut out for it. So for me, like YouTube and commentating on urban planning was like a very natural escape path from all that. But the other piece of it is like I really like some of those issues that urban planners grapple with. I think are just relevant to everybody, right? Like, plans for public transit or for housing. Like this is like tangible stuff that impacts everyday people's lives. And the fact that, so much of the decision making and information around these issues, the fact that they were so inaccessible, right? That they're mired up in really boring council meetings or like 100-page reports. I was like, we could do a much better job of just engaging the general public on these issues. And so that was like the other piece for me was like, I just want more people. I just want this information to be more accessible to more people. Right?
I really think like your channel does a great job at tackling these big issues that might be very overwhelming for some people and like bringing it down, or not even overwhelming, but like you're saying, like the things that are caught up in bureaucracy that you have to sit through long, it's not as accessible, and you're able to deliver it in a very like consumable manner so everyone can take a part of it.
You're gonna make me blush, man.
No.
Thank you.
All right, so
I'm here
that
to clearly.
The nice part.
Okay, now you're gonna roast me. Please.
Now we're gonna to get in. So
some real hard questions.
Yes. So what are your thoughts on the Safeway towers? And I'm joking. as a resident here, I'd be very angry at you if you promote. No, I'm joking.
Oh, do you actually want to get into it, or we got?
We can maybe save that for the latter part.
Okay.
Just to touch on
this is a teaser.
Yes.
Stick around.
It's
and Uytae will offer his thoughts on the most controversial development in East Van.
Yes.
Christ.
No, it actually is. Like I've been so tempted to go and knock on some of these people's doors that have the signs.
Oh
Just ask
what's
them.
going on?
But I don't. That would be an interesting podcast for you to watch. Maybe not for me to film. I might be like
just
scared.
wear body. I mean, I'm seeing some Taekwondo belts in your wall there, so I think you can handle some old NIMBYs.
I don't know. Some people are very passionate about their protests
about their backyards,
urban development. Yes.
Well, okay. Well, we'll save that for later.
Yes, even if we don't get to it. Yeah. But moving on. So to start things a little lighter, I know you did a video on the SkyTrain extension out to UBC.
Yep. Yeah.
And I know a lot has happened since then. Yes. I know a lot has happened since then. I believe the extension only goes to Arbutus, I think. Yep. Mm-hmm. So I've heard in the recent municipal election, there were definitely some different ideas of what should happen. I know there was one candidate running for mayor that was actually opposed to the extension. And I forget her name.
Colleen Hardwick?
Yes. And I think she wanted to put on, she wanted a light rail transit instead or something like that.
Yep.
And I think she was the only one who opposed it, who wanted to reimagine that. But,
sure, yeah. And there's definitely a certain segment of Vancouver's population that would definitely like to see something a little less intense transit-wise going out to UBC. I don't know how much I want to wade into this. I mean, those concerns, and I'm going to completely, make some assumptions here, conjecture. But I feel like a lot of those concerns come from sensitivity to development happening in the west side of Vancouver, and not so much what is the best transportation option for UBC students. Because think about it, if you're a student at UBC and you're taking this subway out to Arbutus, is the expectation then to to have those students get off and go into a light rail train and then go to UBC the rest of the way. Like, to me, that just seems impractical. Like, just make it a rapid transit line all the way out to UBC. Now, I have like other thoughts on like the feasibility of doing that, right now versus I think 2045 is what TransLink was kind of initially proposing. But yeah, to me, the light rail is, my sort of conjecture is that it's more about like not wanting the really tall developments that come with SkyTrain extensions, and not so much like whether this is actually a better transit choice. But there are a lot of people that will be probably angry with me for saying that too. So I'm just gonna like say, like, this is just me putting it out there. Like, don't it's, and not saying it's the 100% truth. Okay,
I think that's actually a pretty accurate. I never thought of it like that, because with like looking at Broadway Commercial, which is like a 5-10 minute walk from here, to see the Safeway towers, where basically there's a one-story like Safeway with a large parking lot, but it's been there a long time, and
put shame on this tower, on this empty parking lot. Redevelop that stuff.
And it's, if you don't know, it's basically a Safeway with a large parking lot right next to the commercial Broadway station, which is a big transit corridor.
One of the busiest transit stations, I believe second or third, depending on where Metrotown is on the list, but second or third busiest station in Metro Vancouver. And I appreciate you establishing context here, right? We have this sort of, grocery store parking lot combo site right next to, as I mentioned, the third busiest SkyTrain station in, our region. And the fact that there isn't kind of, I'll put it this way. I think like one of the things that annoys me the most is like the expectation that a neighborhood should have a premium transit service like the SkyTrain, which literally costs billions of dollars, right? I'm not gonna like try to put a specific number on it, but like literally every kilometer you build of the SkyTrain, it's like multi-millions of dollars going into that project. So for a neighbor to want something like that and be like, that's the type of transit we want, but then also oppose like high density development, because just think of it as like a business case. If the province is going to invest billions of dollars putting rapid transit into your neighborhood, that neighborhood has to change. It just isn't a solid business case. It's not like, it doesn't make financial sense to expand transit to that extent and, have it basically stay the same. So like commercial Broadway is just one of those stations. I would also argue like freaking Nanaimo or 29th Ave or 22nd Ave, like some of these like stations that basically exist between like Joyce Collingwood and say like Main Street Science World along the Expo line, they basically haven't developed much since the SkyTrain was built. And to me, that is, it feels wrong in some way, right? We've got like freaking Metrotown, Brentwood, right? Like literally 30, 40 plus story towers. Clearly a business case is there for that to happen. And literally closer to Vancouver, we have like untouched, unchanged neighborhoods in the midst of a housing crisis. It is one of those things that just makes me a little bit frustrated, shall I say. Damn, we fully have gone into the Safeway.
I mean, and I think that brings us into, with like what you were saying about like the reasons we haven't done this. Would you say that a lot of these stations that you were describing go through more like residential neighborhoods, and that's where a lot of the opposition, especially with the Safeway tower, to fit it, like they want to develop, I think it's 3 towers. And a lot of the residents in here, there's a lot of single family homes surrounding that location currently off of commercial Broadway, obviously. People are very concerned that it's going to change the state of their neighborhood. It's going to change the feel that they've known, obviously. Their backyard won't be as private anymore. And all sorts of things like that. There is definitely concern, and I think...
Do you mind me sort of like riffing off of that?
Of course,
Because like, I think it's important to get into what those concerns are.
Yes.
Because they're complex, but I kind of categorize it in 2 ways. So there are like practical concerns, of course, which is like, as you mentioned, like once you have towers, people are gonna look into people's backyards. I don't know. Like, I think that, I mean, and in fairness, sure, like there's gonna be a little less privacy. It's not gonna be as quiet of a neighborhood. There will certainly be, like increased traffic comes up a lot too. And I mean, I'm skeptical that this one will result in a huge traffic disruption because it's, like I said, next to the busiest transit, third busiest, second busiest transit station in, Metro Vancouver. But, like those are some of the common things that are leveled around these sorts of developments. And I think those are kind of like, to me, that's a category around like we like this being a quiet neighborhood and we just want it to keep it a quiet neighborhood, classic NIMBYism stuff. Then there's this other sort of set of concerns around what I'd call like gentrification and, by building a quote unquote luxury tower in this neighborhood, you're going to drive up the rents all over and you're going to attract like a different, I don't know, like Yaletown bros, finance bros will start moving into East Van, God forbid. And that is, I don't know, like, yeah, like that's another kind of category that I see. And like, to me, I feel like I've set myself up to like, now I have to address all of it. But, I mean, I would say first and foremost to kind of like the more gentrification sort of thing. I feel like just because you freeze a community in time doesn't mean you don't get change. Just because you don't build new housing doesn't mean your community itself stays the same. What's happening, if you don't build anything, it will gentrify anyways. People are already moving into the East Van. That's why there's appetite for these sorts of buildings to be built, is because there's the developers, the people that own sort of these lots see that there is a demand locally, right? Rents are rising anyways. People want to move into East Van. And so if that sort of housing isn't built, where will they go? They'll just go into other existing apartments, right? Other houses. This is kind of an interesting effect I've noticed in my neighborhood. I live kind of more around the Riley Park area.
Oh, yeah.
And that's an area that also is single family housing. But what I've noticed is like, there's no new like apartments that are built there, but there are new buildings that are built, and they are just bigger and more luxurious single family houses. People demolish like a regular single family home built in like the 20s or 30s, and they just build like a mansion, like a modernist, like custom designed, kind of place. And it, so you realize like, yeah, the neighborhood sort of like density has stayed the same, sure, but the neighborhood itself is transforming. It's becoming just way, way, way wealthier. So I would caution that like just because you stop a development doesn't mean you stop gentrification. You just drive gentrification into other buildings, right? That's kind of addressing that. And then the other part around like, privacy and all that stuff. I mean, I get it. I really do. I think there are design solutions to address that kind of stuff. And, that is like, it's way more nuanced than just like density equals, all these other sort of worst case scenario outcomes. But then there's like a little part of me that's like, we live in a city. You live next to commercial Broadway station. Like, move to Belcarra, man. Like, I don't know. Like, move to Langley. That's where I'm originally from. Right? Like, that's, if that's really something you can't, quite handle, this might not be the neighborhood for you, and that's okay, right? Like, gosh, I people are going to be mad with me for saying that too.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
dude, you've got me unhinged vibe.
There must have been something in that coffee, some truth.
Yeah, what'd you put in that coffee?
I'm joking. No, but I guess going into like, because there's obviously tons of different reasons that people oppose development, but I think one of the more prominent, and I would almost say reasonable reasons that people are opposed to new development is in Vancouver. There's a lot of luxury condos, and there's this level of what you were saying where there is a genuine concern that building newer homes that are often designed for a specific class of consumers can influence the rents and land speculation to a certain degree, I think.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Finish.
Yeah, I'm kind of just spewing out of my head right now.
Please.
But I'd say
fair point.
There is not necessarily a concern with development,
Yeah.
but the kind of development that
development.
we're seeing, especially like a good example is the Oak Ridge development right now. That is quite an irony of one of, I'd say, isn't it one of the biggest developments in North America, I would say, arguably.
I think
I've
so.
heard-
Yeah.
And it's in the middle of a housing crisis, and it's geared for upper middle class to luxury.
Totally.
Yes, like I don't even think the middle class in Vancouver you have to be very
Yeah.
in a
Kind of an elite sort
exactly
of home buyers.
and,
Market.
and obviously that's getting into this. I just want to transition into this question of whether and that's not the government's fault. The government isn't necessarily building these. I think that's the result of
Sure, like the private market.
Yes, exactly.
Greedy developers.
People are building what is profitable, and people are building what the market is wanting. And yes, there are a bunch of people that want more affordable units, but that might not necessarily be the most profitable or the most efficient for these developers.
I'd love to talk to that a bit. I mean, gosh. So the first thing I kind of think, and I'll first start by saying, like, I think that's like a fair point, and one that I've had to grapple with. Like, is there a certain part of this that is, the development industry, like, I mean, the incentives certainly are there to go luxury more than, affordable. But unless you're a developer, you really don't know like what they're like. I don't know. Maybe I'll back up here, because like once I start getting into like, whoa, this is clearly a building that's profitable or not. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I've never built a building in my life. But what I will say is, I would be really ask everybody to kind of just be like, what do you mean by luxury housing? And when I think luxury housing, I think mansions. I think, like penthouse, like clearly meant for, like, I don't know, some sort of oligarch or, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who has a yacht as like a, a side vehicle. But when I see like what's actually being developed and being labeled as luxury housing in the city, it's not really that. It's like 1-2 bedroom apartments, right? Like, who do you think is purchasing those, right?
Yeah.
And to me, at least from anecdotal experience, it's like people that are well paid, usually tech workers, doctors, but it's not like people you would typically typecast as, like, I don't know, there's so many archetypes out there, like the foreign investor or like the greedy whatever investor, real estate investor, right? It's like, that's kind of what I find, especially for purpose-built rentals. And I think, certainly you could level some kind of criticism of like, oh, like what are we actually building for condominiums? Because to some extent, that can be used as an investment vehicle for people. But a purpose-built rental, do you know the difference between a condo and a purpose-built rental?
I do not.
Oh, frick. Okay. So much to back up here.
Okay.
Do you mind if I quickly get into it?
Go for it.
So a condominium is an apartment where each apartment unit is sold. So like if I buy a condo unit, I own that unit now.
Okay.
And I usually pay like $700,000 for it, and maybe in a few years' time it appreciates in value. I can sell it, whatever, right? A purpose-built rental is a apartment building where there's one owner of that building and they rent out each unit. And so because of that, like anybody that's living in those buildings, they're not like speculating, they're not investing, they're literally just paying rent, right? And so like some of these like developments that I've seen, that I've heard being labeled as luxury housing, are like rental apartments where like it's not rents that you can afford, but it's somebody is affording them, somebody's making it work for their lifestyle. And if that wasn't built, that person would be competing with you for your apartment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that's like what people don't understand a lot about housing. It's not like we're not building segments of housing, we're building a housing ecosystem, which includes luxury housing, sure, but it also includes older housing that's becoming more affordable over time. It includes all these different things, and they're interconnected. So if you don't build luxury housing, the people that can afford luxury housing, all they do is compete with you for other housing in the market. I think like a good example of this for me is around the Bay Area and around San Francisco, where you don't see a whole lot of new apartments being built. And so what you have instead is like old shitty houses that are being rented out for literally like thousands and thousands of dollars per room. It's just like, right? Like, it doesn't solve the affordable thing by just not building new housing. Sorry, that was so much that I said there.
No. I love it. It's great.
I'll put it back to you, Tatum, before I like just totally take you down a black hole.
The black hole of urban planning.
Of housing.
Of housing.
Housing specifically. Oh, it's a black hole.
You know what it is? It is. Trust me, I could talk about housing for hours on end. I think anyone can at this point. Every time I meet someone new, that's always a topic that comes up, no matter who the person is, right? I mean, it's for reason though. So
for sure, it's a testament to just like how bad it is in the city. Everybody feels it. Everybody wants to try to understand it. And I really do hope that one day we just get to a point where like we can be ignorant about it because it's just available. It's just a one more life expense.
Do you think the reason that a lot of these people label these newer buildings as luxury because of how bad everything has been, like because of speculation and because a 1-bedroom condo in let's say Calgary or something, and you can buy one at a more entry-level price for like 100, 200
more
grand,
affordable,
right? So the fact that is so skewed in Vancouver, and you can buy a single-family house in Calgary for the same price as you can for a condo in Vancouver. Obviously, there's reasons. Maybe Vancouver's a little nicer, but
you think that's going to be a controversial take? Vancouver, Calgary.
I mean, some
what
people
do you think?
Like,
No, I'm kidding. Sure, yeah. We don't have the Stampede. We don't have cowboy boots and 10-gallon hats. That is a trade-off.
Instead, we have skaters and dispensaries.
It's true.
It's a very Vancouver thing.
Oh yeah.
But because of how skewed like our market has.
So to that specific point of like why is a house in Calgary the same cost as a freaking condo in Vancouver? I mean, it all comes down to the land, for sure.
Exactly,
for sure. We're paying top dollar for land here because ostensibly the construction costs shouldn't be all that different, right? So it does come down to the cost of the land here, which is insane.
Yes. Before we get into like the last topic I want to talk about, what would you say are like the main reasons, at least that you think that land has gotten to the point? Like obviously speculation, we're limited. Well, it can be a very general answer.
No, I'm sorry. No. You're seeing the fear in my eyes already. I'm like, oh, how do you explain that?
I'll start off. Is that like
please,
in my urban politics class that I'm taking? I was reading an article about boomerism in specifically in the prairies in the development of the 5 big cities. I don't want to list them because I can't remember them off the top of my head, but that's including like
Calgary, Edmonton,
Winnipeg, etc. Yes.
Okay, Regina. Sorry, Saskatchewan as a city. Regina, Saskatoon.
Yes. There we go, the big 5. And their growth has been on this idea of urban expansion. And oftentimes they can because they just have this endless wasteland of land they can build. Well, I mean, they have the Badlands, which
now
is
you're going to really piss off the Calgarians. I totally get your point, right? You just kind of, the land base, and it's nice and flat.
Yes.
Like, it's theoretically infinite. We're constrained by geography here.
Exactly. Yeah. There's not as many geographical restrictions in Calgary, per se. Yeah. And it allows for them to have this certain level of urban expansion where, I mean, you can definitely see that we've had that in Vancouver. Definitely going back to when things like when East Van started to get developed. And then they just started building these bungalow houses and these like cookie cutter houses just everywhere going up to Burnaby Heights. Endlessly expanding until they realized Vancouver doesn't have a limited amount of land. And I would say, like, it's my understanding is that we ran out of land, or at least we can't build that certain type of housing that is so like we ran out of people.
We ran out of land for the type of housing that we culturally all aspire to, which is that single detached house with the front yard, backyard. And if that is the housing we want for everybody, absolutely, this city is going to be hella expensive because that is a very limited quantity. We have run out of it. And I honestly don't think we should be building any more of it anyways for many, many other reasons, primarily efficiency, costs of, like providing infrastructure and whatnot.
Of course,
I mean, I would completely agree with you that geography probably plays a big role in the affordability issue here. Yeah, I think, I will say there are definitely people way smarter than myself, way smarter than both of us, that have thought about this really critically, and they'll have a very nuanced answer. But to me, at the end of the day, it all comes down to how much we just restrict development on land, at least for the cost of housing. I think, land itself, yeah, clearly land here is going to be expensive, but like for the cost of the housing on that land, I think it is just that like we have zoning bylaws that restrict how much gets built on the land. Now, the nuance for me there is like, is it realistic to, imagine that we'd have a completely elastic supply of housing, like that we just literally let anybody build whatever the heck they want on their land and let the market kind of work itself out? I think that's one extreme. I don't think we're politically ever gonna be okay with that.
Yeah.
But for sure, we're right now we've landed on another extreme, which is like we have like just restrictions all over the supply of housing. We've like made it illegal to build housing in most of the land in our cities, and so naturally that will lead to speculation. And to me, like, there is so much nuance around it, but at the root of it for me is the zoning bylaw.
Okay. So to further into that topic, I guess, obviously there's been like a rise in building costs. So like building homes have been more expensive recently, but definitely the core of the issue is land. I think most people can agree on that.
Sure.
Land is what has been driving up the cost of housing. And that's where the issue is. Like, let's say zoning bylaws, I don't know, somehow in some imaginary world, every single family district in Vancouver could be redeveloped
into Oak Ridge.
Well, maybe not that extreme, but to be more realistic, I guess. I mean, it is a dream world. We can dream big.
Well,
but if we had maybe 3-4 level apartment buildings throughout different neighborhoods, densified it, would that genuinely make housing affordable to a degree where it would open up to people who currently can't get into the market? Or would speculation, because the issue is in the speculation of land, would that issue just be...
Yeah, like would that
eventually
still persist?
Would that still persist, and would that eventually just continue on its way? But instead of having $1 million house, you'd have a $1 million apartment.
Sure.
Because
I mean, okay,
it's a big idea.
At its core, I do believe it is an issue of supply and demand. That there is not enough housing to go around for the people who have an appetite to buy it. Now, solving that, addressing that is tricky, because I think, whether we try to look for solutions from the supply side or solutions from the demand side, right? You run into trade-offs. And I think that's what is at the heart of why we struggle to fix the housing crisis, is we explore each solution and realize, but that means we would have to give up this other thing. So, for example, let's say we tackle the demand side of things, right? We just make it really, really difficult for anyone to buy housing. We ban foreign investors. We ban people from owning a second property. We make interest rates super, super high so people can't even afford it unless they have all the money up front. That will crash the housing market for sure. Affordable housing, yay, we did it. But also now 60% of the population who's invested their like life savings into owning property and rely on it as their retirement savings are basically like that is the Great Depression for them. Like, you know what I mean? And listen, I mean, for me, I'm like, there's no solution to the housing crisis that doesn't involve some amount of pain for people who have invested into property. I really do think so. Like, we kind of have to be honest with ourselves that there's way, way too much like speculation and like investment that has happened into housing that it has to come down at some point. But, but there are extreme solutions that we can do to like tackle it that way, right?
Yeah. But then again, I'm sure you'd have a lot of opposition from those people.
Absolutely.
Who might have their livelihoods depending on this
Of
investment.
course,
right?
of course. But then, like, let's say we tackle it from the supply side. Then we just like abolish all zoning, all application, fees and processes, and I think like to me, like that's I lean more towards that. I'll be honest with you. But sure, like there's trade-offs to that too, right? And trade-offs that we've touched on, like people's privacy, like if people that really want their single family homes, will not like that solution either, right? And so like I think that's kind of what the issue isn't so much like whether the housing crisis is about supply and demand. I think it's just like what how do we want to solve it comes with a lot of trade-offs that create a lot of friction.
Yes. Yeah,
right? Anyways, that's my attempt anyways.
No, that's great. That goes into the very last thing I want to
Okay.
discuss, which, like you're saying, like trying to find a solution to the housing crisis is like, there's basically two sides. There's the people that have housing and they're lucky enough to either have the wealth to buy into it, or if they've inherited it, they have this investment in land, so they don't want to see it necessarily suddenly drop.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, there are people that can't afford it. And in a way, like, housing is a necessity. People need shelter.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to own a single family detached home in the middle of one of Canada's largest metropolitan areas. That's a different story. But that is also affecting the affordability of condos and all the other ways of housing. So obviously, there's no win. One side wins or the other side wins. So the other an alternative
you frame
solution.
it well. Okay, alternative
which
solutions. Ooh, okay.
you brought up in your latest video.
The non-market. The
Yes.
non-capitalist solution.
Yes,
Shall we touch on that?
That is before we go too deep into that.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of people are against that. And there's obviously going to be, oh my God, like social housing, even just non-market housing, or the Vienna model people refer to.
Yeah.
People might be opposed to that because there have been social housing developments throughout North America that have failed drastically.
yeah.
But you can argue that they weren't
Arguably.
necessarily given the chance or the investment to survive. But despite all that, is there hope that we could keep obviously, it'd be very hard to abolish our housing market, but to keep our housing market and be able to provide housing at a much more reasonable cost, if it's rental units or even if it's just entry-level units, to people so they can survive through off-market government-funded housing? Like, is there a balance we can have?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. That to me sounds like a very much like a have your cake and eat it too kind of thing. Like, we're well past the point where we can resolve this housing crisis without a lot of somebody kind of losing out, I guess. Like, let's say we do want like the government to just be like have such a ambitious public housing, social non-market housing funding program. They pour billions and billions of dollars into it. Because of our inflated land values, like it is just so much more expensive of a I almost wouldn't even like think it was an efficient use of government funds. Right? If government is going to get into the housing market, to provide public housing so that like existing homeowners can keep on keep their wealth in some way, like to me that isn't like quite like it's like smart enough to like quite break this down.
No. I think you hit a very good point. Was that like I think the principle of it is good, but because we are already in the water over our heads, it's be really hard for them to buy up that land for millions of
unless because let me put it a bit more simply.
Okay.
Social housing, non-market housing still requires land, and right now the government doesn't have a whole lot of land. If you look at places like Vienna or Helsinki or some Scandinavian country city, like Helsinki, the government, I'm pretty sure owns like 40-50% of the land there. Yeah. And so they have way more ability and sway to just build what they want. But like here in Vancouver, it's kind of like one of those situations where we have like very few parcels of land that are publicly owned left. So that, if we were to try to do this really ambitiously, the government would have to buy land from private homeowners who I don't know if they would want to give a nice discount to the government. So for me, that video, it really challenged a lot of my thinking around housing because, like it did force me to think outside of the whole like markets driven solution to the housing crisis. But my kind of conclusion or my reflection after writing it is that even if we get the government heavily involved and invested in building housing itself, we can't do that without also addressing the private market, without resolving some of the core issues that are creating so much like speculation and
no, that's
whatnot.
That's a really interesting view because I've kind of glorified social housing because like I've thought of the whole process of like, okay, if the private market is gone to shit and there's no hope because in a sense we ran out of land, and yes, it'd be very hard to build enough development with the restrictions that we have and a lot of change, basically trying to think of what's the easiest way out and the more realistic way out. But pointing that out, you have a very valid point that it would be very hard for the government in a place like Vancouver to buy up enough land to do that. And it would be,
let me, sorry, I mean, oh gosh, this happens with literally every housing conversation for me. Like, I never want to overextend myself, because I also, here's the avenue for non-market housing to work out, I think, is like, if, like, to me, non-market housing, like the Vienna model is a solution 50 to 100 years from now. The government can absolutely get a really strong start building as much non-market housing as it kind of is like reasonably feasible. And if they commit to doing that over 40, 50 years, we will end up for sure somewhere 50 years down the line where like I could see like 20, 30, 40% of the population living in government or like non-market housing. And that will absolutely have an effect on the housing market generally. But and I kind of feel like with most housing solutions, it's not something that will happen a year or two from now.
Okay.
At the minimum, this will take like a decade to sort of dig ourselves out of, because we're, to do it responsibly anyways. Like I said, we could also just crash the whole thing. And that will take a year. But if we're trying to do this with like, while minimizing kind of human suffering, this is kind of, we have to do it gradually. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it definitely, like, from what I'm hearing, is that we need a very mixed approach. Like, there's many things that we can do to work towards it. And so there's the idea of, first of all, supply and demand, building more housing. Definitely we can, I know with the Vancouver plan, who knows how that's going to go through with Ken Sim. I don't know how he's going to be too happy about that. Yeah. But ideally, I think, even if there are ups and downs, eventually we're going to get more density. So I think you agree that you point out, like, density will definitely help. So will like maybe
even if it's non-market housing, it's gonna be density. We're not building non-market single-family houses,
but just overall, like, density will help with the affordability crisis. Non-market housing is obviously going to help people get into places that can't afford it. At least they need to have a roof over their head, somewhere they can live to survive. What are other things, like looking at the private market of how far gone it is right now? Are there any ways the government can incentivize certain models of building maybe more affordable rentals?
Okay.
I'm not sure what the government's currently doing, but they might not be able to go out and buy enough land to provide non-market housing.
Sure.
But can they incentivize the private market to build certain models of housing that will make it more affordable or reach that, I guess, lower income level of the market?
So I think incentivize is tricky. So incentivizing, one thing that like comes to mind is what Councillor Christine Boyle has brought up twice now, which is the allowing non-market housing up to 12 stories being allowed. I think it's generally across Vancouver or maybe in arterials, but like giving like an expedited application process for non-market housing. That's like certainly one way to do it, like while working within sort of our zoning restriction sort of ecosystem. Another way that is much more common is that like municipal governments will mandate a certain percentage of a new development to be below market rents, which I feel really conflicted about. I think it certainly helps the specific people who get into those units, but from like a broader housing crisis perspective, I'm very skeptical that actually does anything. But I won't go too fully into this. I feel like I've done that like so many times now, and I'm like, nope, not gonna avoid that rabbit hole.
There's so much to talk about.
But I mean, certainly government can certainly play a role, but I think again, like the most effective role government can play is probably just easing up on the restrictions a bit.
Okay.
Right. And speeding up application processes and making them more predictable. So, just so that like providing housing isn't like this laborious gamble. It's just that providing housing is like just building a freaking laptop. People want it. All right, we can make it, and there you go. Like. I mean, of course it's not that simple, but I wish it was closer to that than just like this freaking like bingo game or something. There's that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to sum it up, I guess if you had to Write
Ken Sim. What do you want to?
letter. Oh, I wasn't gonna say that. I was gonna say in your mind,
Like,
what would be like the very general how-to guide on
how to solve the housing crisis?
I'm not trying to give you
I'm
that
out.
much.
I can't.
Moving forward
Okay.
in our market, how should we approach? Should we allow? Should we oppose density? Should we oppose? Obviously, like no, of course not. I know you're in favor of that. That's
one's
just
an
an
easy one.
example.
Oh.
Like where we should move forward from here, like our mindset in approaching the housing market. Nothing too specific.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't
No
like to be
sweat.
too prescriptive, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I would just, my advice would be to be honest with yourself that this, like getting out of this housing crisis, there's no like easy way out, or there's no kind of like, oh, like we just do this one hack and we can do it pain-free.
Yeah.
Like one thing that really gripes me is when politicians say like, we want housing to be affordable and that's it. But like, there's no acknowledgement then that's like, oh, for housing to be affordable, do you also want like housing prices to go down? And you notice that they never say, they'll always say we want housing to be affordable, but then they won't fully admit, and that means house prices have to go down.
Yeah.
But like realistically, that's probably part of the solution, right? So I think, my first piece of advice is like, be honest, like, listen, like there are going to be trade-offs in how we solve this housing crisis, and I hope that we as a society have like a frank discussion on like what sort of trade-offs we are willing to accept and just stick to it. Because I think right now we're just like, I feel like we're having a lot of useless debates around what is going on with housing, right? It's just, there are like, let's understand the trade-offs and just kind of stick to that. Or, I mean, I think the other option is like, the other trade-off is we just solve it over a very, 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 very long period of time.
Yeah.
Right? And then the other piece is, I think these are not, like the solutions themselves, I don't think are as much of a trade-off as we make them out to be. It's not like if we build luxury housing, that means like we can't build non-market housing. We can, like, everything helps for the housing crisis. There doesn't need to be kind of like we can only pursue this solution and this solution we can't actually pursue. It's sort of like, yes, we need development downtown. We need development along transit corridors. We also need development in our single family neighborhoods. We need development literally kind of anywhere where we're adding housing is helping, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like every little bit counts, and everybody should sort of contribute their fair share, I would argue, in helping resolve this crisis. So that's, how about that? That's such a milquetoast answer, but
That's
like
Uytae's guide to solving the housing crisis. Build more, everyone. Build
yeah, no, that is if there is one thing I would say, like we should be adding more housing as long as there's demand for it.
Last thing just to ask, what is next for About Here?
This video will probably be out by the time you publish it because it's going live next week, but I've got a video coming out about the seawall and why I believe it's boring. So that's, if I haven't pissed off enough people already, they can look forward to being quite upset at that one. And I was just going to say, I feel like this year, I mean, like every year is sort of a kind of toss up of like, what am I going to do more CBC stuff? Am I going to do more YouTube stuff? This year looks like I'll be doing more YouTube stuff. So yeah,
He's coming back, guys. He's
like,
coming back to YouTube.
Like and subscribe.
Check out his channel. So maybe he'll stick around on YouTube a bit more. Also, if you do want to check out, though, I did watch some of your CBC shows.
Yeah, Stories About Here on CBC Gem, Canada's Netflix. At least it really, really wants to be that.
Yeah.
If you check it out, much appreciation.
Can't wait to see what content you come out with next.
And you as well.
Thank you. I mean, you'll see
As
this
a fellow
soon.
content creator as well.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I guess I'll see this one and then I'll be like,
You get to watch yourself. Be like, what the hell?
why
did I agree to this? I'm just kidding. But
no, it'll be those like little clickbaity clips you
yeah.
clip out. Like some super controversial thing I say, and then
Yeah.
like someone will just like post that on Twitter and be like, see, he is insane. And I'll look forward to that drama.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, definitely stick around. There'll be different guests from Vancouver on every week or every 2 weeks. I guess we'll find out how often I upload that.
See what happens.
But thanks for watching. See you guys next time.
Ya.